Mr. Majewski's Anatomy 32 class lecture. Chapter 5, Part 2, Accessory Structures to the Integumentary System. So, one of the most obvious accessory structures is hair. And hair has a variety of functions. It has limited protection functions. It can guard the scalp against injury and exposure to UV. It decreases heat loss from the scalp. And the eyelashes and eyebrows protect the eyes a little bit from foreign particles falling into them. It also has some tactile sensation. It has some touch receptors referred to as the hair root plexus. Now, the anatomy of the hair starts off with there being a hair shaft, which is the superficial portion of the hair, and the root, which is the portion of the hair deep to the shaft that penetrates the dermis. If you look at the hair, you also see it is composed of a number of concentric layers. The innermost layer is the medulla, surrounding that is the cortex, and surrounding that is the cuticle of the hair. Once you've penetrated the skin, you see that the hair will gain additional layers, including the internal root sheath and the external root sheath. The internal root sheath is a cellular tubular sheath of epithelium, and the external root sheath is a continuation of the epidermal layer. And then the final layer of the hair root would be the dermal root sheath, which is a dense dermis surrounding the hair follicle. So it is actually a continuation of the dermis surrounding the hair follicle. You can also look at it as this cross-section, so that it looks a little bit more like a dartboard, where at the innermost level you have the medulla, followed by the cortex and the cuticle of the hair, which will continue on outside to be the hair shaft. And inside you also will then have the epithelial root sheath, composed of the internal root sheath and the external root sheath, and finally, surrounding it all, the dermal root sheath. Here's just another image of the hair root, basically at the very base or beginning of the hair. So the bulb is the portion of the hair root that looks kind of like a bulb. Within the bulb, you'll find at the very base of the hair what's called the papilla of the hair, which is basically a little area that contains areolar tissue as well as blood vessels, forming a little loop to help feed the growing hair cells. Then you'll have the hair matrix, which is the germinal cells that produce hair, of the medulla, cortex, and cuticle layers, as well as the internal root sheath. So the hair matrix is the only place where you see cells undergoing mitosis to form the hair structure. So this is actually kind of similar to the epidermis, where you have one layer at the very most deep layer. That is where cell growth is actually occurring. And then cells that are produced then get pushed up, and basically that then causes the cells above them to get pushed up, and so forth and so forth. Some other structures associated with the hair is the sebaceous gland, or the oil gland. And the oil gland will release its oily secretion into the same pore that the hair is growing out of. You also have the erector pili muscle, which attaches the hair bulb to the superficial layer of the dermis. And it's by contraction of the erector pili muscle that we get goosebumps. You also have the hair root plexus, which is a a network of nerve dendrites that wrap around the hair bulb and will initiate an impulse should the hair be moved. So this is how you can tell that you're being touched by having your hair moved. It's because of the hair root plexus. So the sebaceous gland, or oil gland, is a simple branched acinar gland. So it kind of has a bulbous structure to the gland itself. And it is associated with hair, and so is therefore not found in the palms or the soles of the feet. It engages in holocrine secretion of sebum, and this oily secretion keeps hair from drying and becoming brittle. It helps prevent evaporation from the skin and helps keep the skin itself soft and pliable, and it also inhibits the growth of some bacteria. Next kind of skin glands is the pseudophorous glands, and these are the sweat glands, and there are two kinds, the apocrine sweat gland and the eccrine sweat gland. The eccrine sweat gland is a simple coiled tubular gland, and is very common, found in many places in the skin. It engages in merocrine secretion of sweat, and this is important for thermoregulation as well as emotional sweating, so that when your body kind of sweats a little bit because you're really nervous about something. The apocrine sweat glands are also simple coiled tubular glands. They are found exclusively in the armpits, the groin, the nipples, and bearded regions. And they engage in merocrine secretion that is stimulated during emotional stress and sexual excitement. Obviously, these glands only become active once a person has entered puberty, and they also are the cause of body odor. And the way this happens is that their secretion is then devoured by a particular species of bacteria, and then those bacteria produce the odor that's associated with these sweat glands. You also have the ceruminous gland. It is a modified sweat glands that are found in the ear canal. And when working with the sebaceous glands, it produces cerumen, which is the earwax. And earwax is useful because it helps prevent the entry of foreign bodies, it helps waterproof the ear canal, and also manages to keep out some bacteria and funguses. The next accessory structure we'll talk about is nails. Nails are tightly packed, dead, keratinized epidermal cells. So much like hair, they are composed of the same kind of cells as the skin in sort of the same way. So structures of the nails include the nail body or nail plate, which is the visible portion of the nail. There's the free edge of the nail that extends past the digit. You have the lunula, which is the whitish area, and then the hyponychium, which secures the nail to the fingertip. You can also find the eponychium, which is basically a layer of epidermis protruding out onto the nail. You have the nail root, which is buried in the skin, and then the nail matrix, which are superficial cells that become new nail cells. So again, they undergo mitosis and push the cells in front of them forward, and so forth, and that's how the nail grows. Finally, let's talk about types of burns. So, there are three main kinds of burns that we're all familiar with. You have the first-degree burn, which is only damage to the epidermis. Very common kind of that is the sunburn. Then you have the second-degree burn. The second-degree burn, it damages both the epidermis and the dermis, and you often get blistering. This is basically where fluid is built up between the dermis and the subcutaneous layer. And then finally there's the third-degree burn, which is where damage is done to the epidermis, the dermis, and the subcutaneous layer. So those are the three main types of burns. Turns out there's also 4th, 5th, and 6th degree burns, but I'm not going to talk about those now. Aging and the integumentary system. Well, we're all familiar with one sign of aging, which is wrinkles. And this is caused by changes in the proteins of the dermis. So within the dermis, you get a decrease in the number of collagen fibers. Also, the collagen fibers that are there have begun to stiffen, break apart, and tangle. And the elastic fibers lose some of their elasticity, thicken, and fray. So that leads to the ability for the skin to sort of fold up a little bit and form those wrinkles. Also, as you get older, you'll find a decrease in the numbers of immune-related cells in the skin, decrease in skin gland functions, and overall the skin becomes thinner and more susceptible to pathological conditions. This is also why elderly are more susceptible to extreme temperatures, because their skin glands are not producing enough sweat. That is it for the chapter 5. Hope you enjoyed it.